In my last video, I was talking about the subconscious mind. I ended up ending the video because my camera ran out of battery power and because it was getting pretty dark out, so the camera couldn't even really see me anymore. So I would just like to finish up with what I was talking about the subconscious mind. To understand the subconscious mind and what it actually does, in the last video I was talking about the fight or flight response and how your body has programmed responses that you actually aren't always in control of. One part of the topic I didn't get on when it comes to the subconscious mind is I didn't get an opportunity to talk about how you actually run on autopilot. And this happens to everybody, even if you're trying to live a conscious life or you're living an unconscious life. This autopilot, we run it in multiple aspects throughout our entire day. I would just like to make it clear that when we're running on autopilot throughout the day, sometimes you're running on autopilot and then your autopilot will kick out and it changes and you kind of go into different gears and you shift throughout the day. Just to give you an idea of what I'm actually talking about, when we all go and learn how to drive a vehicle, there's certain steps we have to take in the learning of how to drive that vehicle properly. The reason some people are worse drivers than other people is because some people pay more attention to what they're doing while they are learning how to drive the vehicle. For instance, I'll give the example with me. When I was learning how to drive a vehicle, first to take your learner's license, you have to study the book and learn what all the signs mean and learn all the basics about traffic laws and traffic rules. And then you go and you write your written test. So then after you've had your learner's license for a bit, then you can actually go and you take a physical driving examination where you get into the vehicle and you drive and you get marked on your driving and you get marked on your parking. So that's how you get your driver's license. And you start off with no license to getting a learner's license to progressing to a driver's license. When I got my driver's license, I didn't stop learning at that point in time. In my mind, I knew I was a decent driver, decent enough to get a license, but every time I drove, I was still very conscious about what was happening around me. So I mean, it seems like a lot of people, they've had some experience driving, and it's almost like when they get their driver's license, they just stop learning, or they stop caring about paying attention to their driving. And those are the people that are the worst drivers in the world. And in a lot of times, they don't even realize how bad of drivers they are. But for me, even after I got my license, I paid attention to what was going on around me. I kept watching the signs, and I literally kept myself conscious and kept paying attention while I was driving. And the longer that I did that for, the more I consciously lived in the moment while I was driving, the better of a driver I became. So then when I got older and I started not paying as much attention, because I mean, I was comfortable driving, so I didn't pay attention all the time when I'm driving, and it basically got to the point where driving just becomes a habit. I was learning how to drive for a longer period of time, I think, than what most people were learning, because I was paying attention longer. So I think that's why I'm a better driver than most people. I know everybody says that, but I mean, this is my experience, not your experience. I know you think you're a good driver too, and everybody thinks they're a good driver, but I mean, we all know there's shitty drivers out there. So I paid attention longer, I lived in the moment longer. So because I was living in the moment longer and I was paying attention longer, I ended up adding to my program. So not only did I have the base program, but I kept adding to it because I kept living in the moment and I kept paying attention and being aware in the now. And that's exactly what spirituality teaches people to do, is they're telling people to live in the now moment. They're telling you that there is past, there is a future, but the now is the only thing that actually exists, right? Because we are living on a linear timeline living in our current existence, our awareness is only aware of the linear timeline that we are living on. We can remember the past, but we're not aware of our future. So I mean, sometimes you can get glimpses into your future. Because we're living a linear timeline, you usually don't get to see your future or any other part of the future. Really, since the future doesn't exist yet, because you haven't made the choices to get you to the future, and you have memories of the past that you've experienced, but you can't relive that experience unless you relive it in your memory. But I mean, if you're living in the now and you're going through past memories, you're not living in the past when you're doing that. You're just taking your now moment and wasting it, in essence, by reliving that past experience that you already had. It's almost like it's a waste of your current now, because you're not actually living in the now that you're bringing that thought up and you're thinking about it. Now you're in essence kind of living in the past, but I mean, you're just kind of wasting your now moment. Because I paid attention longer when I was learning how to drive, my programming became more detailed, more in depth, and I became a better driver. Whereas the people that got their license, they basically figured that they were good drivers because they got their license and passed the test, and then they stopped learning. So they literally just started immediately getting occupied by the radio, and they weren't paying attention when they were driving. So I mean, their base programming and their subconscious mind never got better. So they became a shitty driver, and the longer that they drive, it doesn't affect their programming. It doesn't make them better drivers because they no longer pay attention when they're driving. I mean, the only way you can add to your program is by living in the now and paying attention to the now. I mean, you can become a better driver like by thinking about how to be a better driver. You can become a better driver by reading books. You can gain as much knowledge as you want on how to be a good driver, but in essence, the wisdom part of driving is the doing part of it. Like, you can't get the wisdom in something until you actually apply it. It's like economics. If you go read a whole bunch of economics books, that's great because you get a lot of base knowledge about economics. But if you're not actually practicing economics on a daily basis, then you're not getting the wisdom behind economics. So you can have a huge amount of knowledge in anything, but if you're not living in the now and practicing it in the now, then you're not gaining wisdom of it. So I mean, if you want to become a better driver and you read a book on how to become a better driver, if you become aware in the now while you're driving, start applying that knowledge that you got, then the outcome will be you being a better driver, and the outcome will be you turning that knowledge into wisdom. That basically goes for everything in life, right? So you can have a lot of knowledge in something, but if you're not practicing it, then you're not gaining the wisdom of that. And the wisdom is where the magic happens. The knowledge, there's no magic that happens with the knowledge. It's in the wisdom part where the magic happens. Now, when I'm driving though, I'm reverting when I'm not paying attention. So when I'm listening to the radio or I'm talking to somebody and I'm driving and I'm not really paying attention to what's going on, I am literally pulling up my driving program. It's not me that's driving the vehicle at that moment in time. It is my subconscious mind that is now driving the vehicle. That's why sometimes you can drive and you'll think back to what you've been doing for like the last hour, and you'll realize that sometimes you don't even remember any of the trip. Like, you won't remember the last hour of like what vehicles you passed or what you saw or anything, because your mind was diverted and you weren't paying attention. So your conscious mind was doing something completely different, and it was your subconscious mind that was driving. And the only way your subconscious mind can do anything is if it's got a program. So if it's got a shitty program, you can be guaranteed you were doing some shitty driving. If you got a good program, you can be guaranteed you were driving good, even though you weren't consciously paying attention to it. Our subconscious mind is very comparable to a computer system. When you're on the computer, most of the computer programs are actually running in the background, so you don't even see what is running and what the computer is actually doing and processing, because most of what you're doing is in the background, just like your subconscious mind is running in the background. So even though you're awake and you're consciously living your life, or unconsciously living your life, your subconscious is running. So the reason spiritual gurus say to live in the moment is because the moment is the learning moment. That's the moment that you're living in, the now moment that they all talk about. That's the moment where you get to make the decisions. That's the moment where you can influence your future life the best. That moment is the only moment you ever live in your entire life. You only ever live in the now. Like I said, if you're in the now, but you're thinking about the past, yeah, you're living in the past because you're thinking about a past memory. But that now moment, like I said, it becomes wasted. And you never get that now moment back again. Just like if you're thinking about the future and you're trying to plan for the future, you're not actually living in the future, but you're spending your now moment, the power moment, you're spending it thinking and trying to plan and plot for the future. So there is a benefit to thinking about your future and planning for your future in the now moment, but because you can't actually live in the future till you get to the future, it has limited uses. And that's why spiritual gurus say don't live in the past, because when you're thinking about things that happened in the past and you're living in the past, you're throwing away all those now moments because you can't change the past. Because you can't change the past, but you're living in the past by thinking about the past, your now moments are passing away and you're not actually doing anything in those now moments to make a better future for yourself. So that's why your future will end up being the same as your past, because you're not planning for your future. You're not thinking about your future. You're not living in the now, where the power of the now is the only time you have to change your future. I mean, the subconscious mind can only do what it's told to do. It's just like your Windows program. I mean, your Windows program can only do what it's programmed to do. If you got a shitty Windows program with a whole bunch of errors in it, I mean, that Windows program is not going to run very well in the background, and you're going to have a hard time doing what you want to do on that Windows program. Your subconscious mind runs better when it's programmed better. When you're listening to spiritual teachers, you hear them say it all the time. Like even the ancient gurus, like the Buddhist monks, the South American gurus, the Central American gurus, I mean, they all tell you to live in the now. They all understand the power of the now. They don't really say it in ways that is easy to understand, right? Like they just say the same phrase over and over and over, but I mean, if you didn't get it the first time, you could hear it over and over and over and you may never get it. It's a very easy concept. It's not really well explained. So that's why I want to try to explain this by adding on to what I had talked about in the last video that I did. So because the power is in the now, because your subconscious programming can only be programmed if you're living in the now, your future can only be changed to what you want it to by making the decisions you need to make in the now. That's why the now is so important. That's why thinking about the past and living in the past is such a drain and a waste on people's lives. That's why spiritual teachers basically in essence tell you forget about your past, because if you're living in the past, then you're not going to make the changes for the future. You're not going to get what you want in the future. The only way to get what you want is by making the decisions today, and that's why they tell you to live in the moment, to live consciously now, which means don't be daydreaming all the time. You're going to make mistakes in the now as you're going through life. You're going to come into things that you're not an expert in. You're going to come into things that you want to learn how to do better, but the only way to get to do them better is by making the mistakes that you're going to make. But you need to learn from those mistakes. If you're just living subconsciously and you're making those mistakes, then you're not learning from the mistakes. Then you're not going to be better in the future because you didn't get the lesson needed. So you're just going to keep making the same mistake over and over and over, or making making other worse mistakes. Like we heard in school all the time that the past can repeat itself. Learning about World War I, learning about World War II, all the decisions and the things that we do, they just repeat themselves. And the reason that it repeats itself is because we don't learn from our mistakes. But if we learned from those mistakes, then we wouldn't have to repeat those mistakes. So it's almost like the consciousness of the world. The reason we had World War I, the reason we had World War II, which was basically like the repeating of history, was because we didn't learn from World War I. I mean, that's why we're going to have World War III, because we didn't learn from World War II. It's almost like the consciousness of mankind is subconscious, and the subconscious program is a shitty program, because not everybody's taking the time to change that program, to consciously pay attention, to consciously be aware so that they can consciously change the subconscious program. Well, that's the only way that we can get out of having a crappy future and having the past repeat itself as our future. If people learn the lessons that were meant to be learned from the past and they implement them in the now, and then in doing so, that is what will change our future. Not only do you have a subconscious mind, but all of mankind together has a subconscious mind. That's why there is known scientific fact that there is a groupthink mentality. So I mean, if you're in a group and that group starts rioting or something like that, that's why that idea of rioting in that group kind of becomes a contagious thought in that group. As that thought kind of spreads through the group, I mean, if you're standing in that group and people are rioting around you and you're not joining the rioting, now all of a sudden you're standing out because you're not following what everybody else is doing. So now you know you're gonna get noticed because you're one of the ones not rioting, and then more and more and more people are gonna be rioting in that group. So more and more and more you're gonna be the outcast of that group until the point where you do the same thing that that group is doing, and all of a sudden you start rioting just like everybody else. So it's a known scientific fact that that happens. I mean, we've done experiments where people have been put, like the test subject was put into a waiting room for a fake appointment. So what they had everybody do is a bell would ring in the waiting room. Everybody in the room would stand up because they were trying to see if they could force the person that's sitting there to stand up as well. And almost everybody that was put in there as a test subject would eventually start standing up. Then they'd start taking people out of the room to the point where it was just the person that was the test subject left in the room. And every time that bell rang, they'd stand up. They had no idea why they were standing up, but now all of a sudden, because they sat down, they consciously realized people were standing up every time this bell rang. So they want to be part of the group, so they want to join the group think so they don't stand out. So they start standing up with everybody. Then it gets to the point where they're doing it so much, now it's subconsciously programmed into their mind. And this experiment, I think, only took like a half an hour long or something, but she already got it subconsciously programmed into her mind to hear that bell, and boom, she stands up. She doesn't know why anybody's doing it. She just knows they were doing it. Now she's the only one in the room, and because she's programmed subconsciously to do it, she just keeps doing it, not knowing why she's doing it. I mean, she just does it. And that shows the power of this group think and this group mentality and this of human beings wanting to fit in, to be a part of the group. So I mean, that's why you can have like a whole city of people and there be like just a group over here that starts rioting and creating chaos, but meanwhile everybody else in the city is doing fine and is normal, living normal lives. It's because of the group mentality. That's why you'll get like riots at hockey games or riots at soccer games. I mean, not the whole city's rioting, just the people that were at the game. And I mean, people will walk by that weren't at the game and they might just keep walking and not become part of the group think because they weren't at the game, so they don't know what the heck was going on. And some people might walk by and join in too. I mean, it depends what kind of a person that you are. But they've done experiments like this on monkeys as well. So what the monkey experiment was they put a ladder in a pen and they put monkeys in the pen. Then they put bananas and hung it up above the ladder. Every time time a monkey would climb up the ladder to try to go get the bananas, all the other monkeys would get sprayed. Eventually it got to the point where all the monkeys in the room would stop other monkeys from climbing the ladder because they didn't want to get sprayed. So then before you know it, there was no monkeys climbing the ladder in the group. So what they started doing is they started putting new monkeys into the group. So then the new monkey would try to climb the ladder and he would get beat up for climbing the ladder, but they weren't even spraying monkeys anymore. They would just literally have the monkey climb the ladder and all the monkeys beat the new monkey up. Then the new monkey would stop going up the ladder. Then they put another new monkey in. Now that new monkey tries climbing up the ladder, and then all of them once again beat up on that monkey and stop it from going up the ladder, even though no monkeys are being sprayed anymore. And the new monkey that was never sprayed ever is beating up on the newest monkeys, trying to keep them from climbing, and he has no idea why he's doing that. He's just doing it because all the other monkeys were doing it to him. So then they start taking the original monkeys that were getting sprayed out of the pen. Like I said, they kept replacing them with new monkeys. It finally got to a point where there was never a monkey left in that pen that had been sprayed with water, but still when they put a new monkey in the pen and the new monkey tried climbing the ladder to go get the bananas, all the monkeys would beat on that monkey and none of them would climb that ladder, and none of those monkeys had been sprayed ever. So they didn't know why they were doing it, but they just kept doing it. So I mean, and even after the monkeys that were sprayed were taken out, it just kept carrying on. That mentality, that idea of that's how they have to live, kept carrying on. We've also done tons of studies on humans where we'd sit them in a room and there would be like different questions. They would show the group of people different lines and they'd start off on the one side and say, which line's the longest? And I mean, so the longest would be line A, but they would say line B. And then it would go down the line, B, 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 B. And it comes to the test subject, and the test subject's like, well, it's A. But then it finally gets to a point where he's repeating, even though he knows the answer's wrong, he's repeating what everybody else in the group is repeating. Groupthink is a scientific fact because humans have a huge willingness to want to fit in and to want to belong to a group, and they don't want to be outcasts. And because of that, we do things that we know are morally wrong and we know that we shouldn't be doing, but because it ends up becoming something that's programmed into our subconscious, like our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between good and bad. That's our conscious mind that knows the difference between good and bad. So you could put any program you want into your subconscious mind, including a violent one, like being the monkey that's beating up other monkeys that are trying to climb the ladder, whether you were sprayed with water or whether you weren't sprayed with water. I mean, that ends up becoming a subconscious program that you just do because society does it. You don't know why you do it. You don't know the meaning behind it. You just do it because everybody else does it. So the reason that that happens is because it ends up getting ingrained in you subconsciously. So the only way you can get rid of that subconscious programming is by living in the now and saying, I do this, but why do I do this? Like pointing out to yourself, what is my reasoning for doing this certain thing? So if you start sitting there thinking about why you're beating up every monkey that's going up the ladder, because it's not harming you them going up the ladder, and you start consciously thinking, well, why am I doing this? Why do all the other monkeys do this? And you're now thinking in the now, so you're living in the now. You're now bringing light to something that you had no awareness of before because you had never thought before about why you do that thing that you're doing that is harming other people, but you don't know why you and everybody else is doing it. You just are doing it because it's programmed into you. But now that you're bringing light to it, that brings you the power in the now to change the things that you were doing. So you can change that program. So now that you're aware of it, when someone goes and climbs that ladder to go get those bananas, you can make the conscious choice and say, you know what, I'm not going to beat on them. And then you might even get to the point where you say, you know what, I'm actually going to ask ask everybody else why they're doing that to them too. And then as you're asking the other monkeys saying, why are we beating on this monkey that's climbing the ladder? And they go, I don't know. Getting them out of that shady subconscious program is going to be really, really hard. But at the same time, they might wake up long enough to ask, like, even though they hear you asking the question, it doesn't mean that they're actually hearing the question. But they might at some point wake up long enough that they might go, yeah, why am I beating up on that monkey? Him climbing that ladder's not hurting me. What do I care if he gets those bananas? Maybe he'll share one with me if he gets those bananas, and I would like a banana. They might start questioning it, or they might not question it. They might just keep going on subconsciously doing what they're doing. Asking them that question is maybe the first step to getting them to realize that maybe what they're doing isn't the best thing to do. Maybe there's something better that they could do. And then getting them to question it, maybe they'll start asking the same question for themselves that you're asking for yourself. And I mean, that's the only way that real change can come, and the only way that we can change our subconscious programs. And I mean, you get a lot of those programs put into your subconscious mind when you're a child, because you're learning subconsciously. That's the only way you're learning. That's why you can learn so quick when you're a child, because you got like alpha brain waves. Like the alpha brain waves are the closest brain waves to your consciousness when you're sleeping. When you're living in that brainwave state, you're capable of learning a lot of things. You're capable of doing a lot of things. But I mean, that's kind of what they call getting in the zone. I mean, any sports athlete, when they're in the zone, that is kind of they're in that subconscious part of just doing, because the program has been set, and they're not really thinking about the subconscious program, and they're just kind of doing.